This is live.
This is live.
Are we gonna tell the people?
Yeah, let's let the people know. It just got live. It just went live on YouTube. So you want to go ahead and plug it in?
Yeah, give me a sec.
All right, sick. We are good. I switched out my Ethernet cord, by the way, so hopefully I'm not lagging too much on this stream.
No, you are.
Am I really? Or, no, I'm not. I'm looking at it right now.
Nah,
Cool. No one's joined yet.
bro, my plant looks sick on stream. Let me get the candle in there. Yeah. No, that won't catch.
All right, cool. I'll see it if it catches.
Yeah,
The
you
whole
guys
stream
probably-
will the whole stream will see it if it catches.
It'd be pretty sad. I like this plant. Okay, let me throw this in the thing. Echo.
Dope.
Going live, talking horror games. Smiley face.
All right, awesome. Cool. We got 2 concurrent viewers, so hopefully people are watching. Got the notification if they are subscribed to us on YouTube.
Hell yeah.
So cool, man. All right, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, let me just get the chat popped out so I can look at it. Sorry. People in the waiting room right now waiting for the show to start. What's cracking?
Oh wow. There's a waiting room?
No, I mean just like the metaphorical.
Oh, the people that were waiting. Yeah.
Yeah, that are already watching. Yeah.
Are you gonna be chewing gum the whole time?
Is it that fuck on these?
Just put it. Just slam it under your desk. Matt, we're live. Oh man. Now everyone can see.
KT says, "Woohoo!"
What's up? I wonder who that is. That's weird. It's just a letter followed by another letter.
Hey, yo,
That's
KT.
weird.
I ordered, whoever you are, I just want to let you know, I ordered some all white Nike shoes for the fans.
So excited.
Then I'm going to get some clothes from Uniqlo, and I think I'm set.
Oh. You're getting there, man.
I cap.
You're getting there.
Kind of not. All right.
Go for it.
Cool. Sorry, my
Get us going.
I'm working on it. All right.
I'm good.
All right, you ready for this? You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah.
Want to clap in?
Yeah, sure.
3, 2,
2, 1.
Nice.
Cool.
Ah! Whoa!
Stop. You definitely peaked for our speakers.
I know. I'm just so scared.
Had you
right,
been planning?
everyone.
Were you planning this intro?
We
for that, or
are.
you just came
I
up
might
with
have
that?
been- we are officially kicking off the Spooktober over here at the Thanks for Playing podcast. Lucas, what are you most excited for this October?
Getting spooked,
Oh,
pretty much. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm stoked. I love the change of the season, and it's getting darker like
we
an
live in
hour earlier.
California, there's
Okay,
no seasons.
there are seasons. I don't get why people
There's
say this.
not. It's-
There are seasons.
No.
It's not seasonal
Maybe
in
if you
terms
live
of
in,
like
Big Bear.
no, it's not. When I say seasons, I mean change in overall vibe of what's going on out there. Because like it's gotten darker earlier. It's dropped
I
about
actually
20
don't like that,
degrees.
personally.
It's dropped about 20 degrees since 2 weeks ago. It used to be mid 90s. Now it's like mid 70s, right?
Mhm.
There's pumpkin spice lattes at Starbucks. Spirit Halloween stores are back. This is what like seasonality is like corporate now. You
How
know,
many
that's what I
times in your
feel.
life have you ordered a pumpkin spice latte?
Probably twice.
Twice. And how many times are you going to order one this year?
Probably More than that.
I fucking hope so.
Okay, you'll
Um,
check up on me in a couple weeks. We'll see how we're doing on it. No,
no,
but
man.
listen,
California has two seasons, two modes.
I don't mean weather when I say seasons.
Then don't say seasons.
No, but seasons doesn't. Okay, so seasons as a word does not always refer to weather because you can have a season of a TV show. It just means the arc. Okay,
Fine.
like the general vibe of the
California's
world
in
is
its
changing.
spooky arc right now.
Yeah, it is because
Yeah.
we got Spirit Halloween stores popping up. You can buy like I walked into Trader Joe's and it's all fall decorated. There's Halloween Horror Nights is back at Universal Studios. Disneyland is like all freaking harvest themed and stuff. So
I will say one of the apartment doors outside in my building, they got a pumpkin outside of it now.
I have a pumpkin outside my door as well.
So that's
That's what
something.
I mean. That's what I mean. It doesn't have to be weather related.
You gotta acknowledge that. It's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Okay. Plus, I'm playing RuneScape again.
Oh.
Great, you know, great fall winter game for sure. Just cozy on up, chopping wood cutting, you know. Just hit 60
RuneScape
wood
honestly
cutting.
is the perfect like casual layback game too. I know you want me to get into it again, and it'd also be a really good game to play while I work. I think too, because I'm on
Dog.
the phone a lot. So like normally like when I at my previous jobs before I got where I'm currently at, I would like to like listen to podcasts or stuff to help pass the time. But I'm like on the phone a lot at my job now and talking. So like a RuneScape would be perfect because I could just be talking on the phone, and be like, "Yes, Janet, I'll take care of it." While I'm, like,
I
secretly chopping U logs by the Grand Exchange and planning my next takeover to raise the prices of Granite Malls.
Is that what you would do?
I was part of a merchant clan for a bit, which was actually a pump and dump scheme. That's a topic for another day. But RuneScape is actually incredibly fascinating that it did have its own functioning economy. Um,
Does
it
have
does.
its own
It
functioning
does have its
economy.
own. It's still going on. Yeah, it taught me about the basics of supply and demand, more practical rather than what they teach you in school. But I'll tell you what I'm most
Yeah,
excited about is there's more pumpkin scented stuff available right now,
that's what I
and
mean.
I'm a big proponent of spiced pumpkin
Yeah.
candles.
For those of you watching the
Um,
video stream, Matt is holding a candle to his webcam.
might just put it. It's too close to the mic.
Yeah.
But I think that's my favorite part. And then the best part is once this month is done, we can officially start listening to Christmas
Christmas music. Yep.
which I can't wait for the Christmas episode. Whatever we do this year, we'll figure something fun out. It'll be sick. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I don't know. I do know what you mean by the vibes though. Like I don't know from April or from May, yeah, from April till September and then in September, it's
There's
just
no
kind of the
vibe.
same mode.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
kind of
no. Yeah.
the vibes die with Easter.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then it's not until we hit like fall where like we start to actually feel like there's a spirit in the air of something. And I know it sounds corny or whatever, but like even if it is corporations that are driving like that spirit, I'm still cool with it, right? Because it's like we're just as into stability as we are into change. That's my personal human philosophy, right? And like every year it's the same rotation of vibes, but it's always nice when vibes change.
Yes, I agree.
Speaking
Um,
of vibes,
oh,
Matt, what are we talking about today?
oh, ah!
There was the segue.
There's the segue today, everyone. We are talking about a very interesting stamp in the gaming world. Actually, a very unique genre that can't be defined very easily. But Lucas and I are brave, and today we are going to do our very best to define and just kind of dig into horror video games and what really makes a video game, what puts into that horror genre, and kind of what are some of the characteristics that make it up, and just some of our all-time faves. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to kick off everybody's October, I think this is going to end up being our first October episode,
Mm-hmm.
and which is
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool. So just to kick off everybody's October, we want to kind of go through the line of, notable horror games for one, and then talk like game design and sound and graphics, kind of like what we do on our regular episodes, but just with the overarching genre of horror. Got a few horror games coming out for you in October episodes, a couple October episodes with some horror. Um, I'm not sure if we should really say what we're playing. What do you think?
I'll give a hint. I'll give a hint. One's an old school, kind of more not retro, but older school, early 2000s GameCube game.
Hmm.
Um, and the other will be a exciting, scary movie co-op adventure for Lucas and I that he's probably gonna come over and play at my place actually
Yeah, I'm
with
excited.
Remy Malik. So,
Okay, that's a huge clue. I think I think anybody
yeah.
that's paying attention to those horror games, yeah, they'll get
But
it.
they might not
Uh,
be, and I think I left the first one ambiguous enough. But we got exciting lineup.
do you want to start off just with? I think we can start with notable scary games first, just to get people in the mood thinking about this kind of stuff. What do you think?
100%. Yeah.
All right.
Let's start alphabetical order, then kind of skew from there. I'm thinking.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Okay. I don't know. This list is not in
so
alphabetical
we're
order,
gonna
but
start with the top of the list because it's alphabetically sorted. Alan Wake.
all
Now this
right.
is a notable one for obvious reasons. I mean, Lucas, we did Alan Wake what 3 months ago, 4 months ago, something like that.
Yeah, I think we did it. Yeah, 3 4 months ago.
Pretty pretty spooky. Alan Wake's one of those interesting ones that it's not necessarily outright scary, but it conditions you to be on edge. Was my experience playing it. Um, Not so, because like there's a few jump scares here and there, and those are kind of scary. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, a good jump scare can get me at any point, but that's not really truly. I take back what I just said. A jump scare is not truly scary. A jump scare just gets like your blood pumping and stuff, right? It gets
Hmm.
like your anxiety and your stress levels through the roof. But what Alan Wake did do very well, that I do kind of falls into my category of scary, was after the first couple times where you're just walking and suddenly you get attacked from behind. That's when I'm like, oh, I need to be careful. And then I
Yeah.
always found myself like when I'm walking, turning around, checking my sticks, being like, who's there? Who's there? And that was my experience with that game. And to be able to create that conditioning and that kind of constant fear of I need to be checking my six constantly. Is there a random guy running up behind me? That's what did it for me in that game. But at the same time, the game also had a lot of satirical elements to it almost with
Yeah.
some of what the characters would scream. Like they would just scream the most random facts during that game. Like,
You mean the enemies that would appear out of nowhere and say like
yeah, like
basically say the equivalent of like a catchphraze or
yeah,
something?
like don't
Like
forget your vitamins.
yeah.
Yeah, like really random shit. Like if it was a pharmacist or something, that kind of
Al-
took you out of the moment there.
What's funny to me is like Alan Wake was more, I felt more action. Like I felt more of a reaction to action and like shooting people and stuff like that. It was obviously a horror setting, but it wasn't scary. It didn't scare me because it was a scary game, if that makes sense. Because I don't think that the game design elements of Alan Wake are scary game design elements, which we're going to be diving into and talk about game design. But compare like Alan Wake to like, you know, Silent Hill or Resident Evil, right? Like those games are scary for other reasons, even though they technically both have a similar, like basically the same setting, right? It's kind of like supernatural forces or like you're getting attacked by a
PNW.
lot of enemies. Yeah. Yeah. And like, I mean, what what makes Alan Wake not as horror game of a horror game as something like I don't know, Five Nights at Freddy's, for instance, or
Right.
Doki Doki, which well, I'm kind of getting ahead of us ourselves on the list, but continue.
So we got Fatal Frame. Lucas, I think you added this one. Are you familiar
I
with it or
I
not?
did. So Fatal Frame, I remember when Fatal Frame was coming around. I think I played it's a series, and I think I played the one on I believe it was Fatal Frame 2 on PlayStation 2. And I want to like it's so crazy. So when it comes to some video game like scary video games, I feel like there was a big heyday of scary video games back in like the early 2000s, like 2000 to 2010. Um, there was like a point where scary games, horror games, Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Fatal Frame, Dead Space. There's like a lot of really great game. Condemned, I didn't put it on the list, but I have that as well. Um, where there was a lot of games that were both scary in setting and scary in game design elements. They were like survival horror. Your character wasn't really great at moving, like there wasn't a lot of movement options. And then I think that survival horror became sort of a dominant game genre, and then survival horror slowly started leaking into like third person action game, like Dead Space 2, Dead Space, the Dead Space sequels are just totally like action games. They're not really a survival horror similar to Dead Space 1.
Yeah.
Fatal Frame is sort of part of that old guard of like games that movement was very limited. It was scary. You felt powerless when you were playing the game. But the problem with some of those older games is the graphics are just look old now. They just look like old 2004 games. So there's this weird thing where when graphics are driving the scary setting for certain video games, they lose steam over time. Like people are going to play Outlast 15 years from now and go, wow, like this game looks like shit. This is not scary at all. Because like the
Yeah.
illusion goes away in a way. And that's kind of what Fatal Frame has become, I think.
I feel like Atlas has actually pretty decent graphics, right? And I feel
But that's
like,
what they thought about Fatal
well,
Frame.
I think the jump of graphics is going to be less and less in the future. But yeah, I get what you're saying, and that's particularly true. I mean, such an important part of horror games is making sure everyone's immersed, right? And making sure it is a game that keeps your attention and that makes you feel like you're there. And when you're playing an older game from the early 2000s or earlier, or even later, sometimes if the graphics don't hold up, it just doesn't really fulfill that anymore for you.
The immersion is harder to maintain for for a new audience that's seen
Yes.
different things. Even I was watching some old Amnesia clips. Amnesia is the next game on our list. I was watching some old clips of Amnesia, which to me was the scariest game I had ever played when I first played it. Famously, like made PewDiePie very, very popular because he did like playthroughs of that game back in the day, and like, oh yeah, I didn't know that actually. That game, if you go back and look at it now, it's probably a little bit less scary than you remember because you're gonna see the graphics and go like, oh, okay, it just doesn't look as good. I don't know. Back then it was the peak of like certain graphical capabilities. Now it's just not. So
I actually
kind of a weird line.
intentionally avoided Amnesia just because I knew it'd scare the shit out of me.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how you would play it today and feel about it, but
I'd probably
I
still
loved
get a
that
little
game.
scared, honestly, because I've seen how it looks. Like it's still enough to get me. I think just the atmosphere of it all.
Mhm.
And I'll be honest, everyone, I scare easy. I scare very easy. I'm a jumper. I'm a jumper.
Yeah.
I'll never forget. I was got a fun little anecdote. I was doing an escape room with my buddies back when I was in San Diego, and this one had like an actor in it, right? And then the actor would occasionally pop out of the door, and they had like Freddy Krueger hands that would like try and like
That's
scratch
cool.
you. And he popped out and did it when I really wasn't expecting it, and I was next to my buddy, and I like grabbed him and I started to like try and run away. Then I started falling, and I dragged my friend all the way back with me into like a bathtub in like a really scary room. And it was just a mess. But
Oh my god, sounds
when
like
I
a
ended
Saw
up on the
movie.
ground, we almost like broke a lamp. It was bad. It was bad. It was kind of like a bad Saw movie, actually. It was an interesting escape room to say the least. But all right, next we got Silent Hill. I think you already kind of dug into that a little bit.
Yeah, so did you ever play Silent Hill?
I did not. I typically, for the most part, intentionally avoided the horror genre.
Well, like these were all pretty much rated M games when we were like when these games had come out, and I mean they're still rated M, but I was too young to really actually buy these games when they had come out, and the only reason I was really able to play them is because my older brothers were able to buy them, so they were just around, and I'd pick them up and play them. Silent Hill, I didn't really give a full playthrough. Interesting enough. That for sure has like if you go back and just watch YouTube videos of it, you will like the point I'm drilling in about graphics in horror games, you will really, really feel it if you look at some old Silent Hill stuff. And you have to remember, and for those audiences, anybody, Dragoon, I see that you're in the chat, man. How's it going? Just Google Silent Hill 1, and just remember that was the scariest game at the time by far, and you'll see it and you'll kind of like chuckle a little bit with like some of what the creatures look like and like what it looks like, you'll go like, how is that the scariest game of all time? That's what's mind-blowing about it. But Silent Hill story is protagonist goes into a town. They made a movie as well, and the movie was I think moderately popular. Nowhere near as good as the Resident Evil movies, of course. Yeah, protagonist goes into a town to find his daughter, I believe, and encounters like a bunch of psychological thrills in the town. So it has become sort of a classic. We're going to dive into talking about PT a little bit later, which is sort of a continuation or sequel to Silent Hill. So we'll be kind of going into that. But next on the list, we got Five Nights at Freddy's.
Resident Evil, yeah, and I kind of
Oh,
want I don't want us to spend too much time on each individual game, just
yeah,
otherwise this will be longer than even a normal game episode.
yeah.
So
Let's
Resident
just talk.
Evil,
Let's just talk.
Resident Evil, know it and love it, classic. Five Nights at Freddy's made so many YouTubers careers to start with, like
Totally.
freaking helped PewDiePie, Markiplier, Game Theory, a channel I really like, did a lot for them. Dead Space is a classic, of course, as
Love
well.
Dead Space.
Need to
Played
do
all
that
that.
for the podcast. I actually haven't played any of the Dead Spaces. Fear, an older mid 2000s, I think mid to like late 2000s single player game series.
It was an action FPS with like horror elements,
Mhm,
basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna lump these two together: Valheim and The Forest. Valheim, again, Lucas and I have played this with our friends quite a bit. Definitely not scary right away, but there's some scary elements to it where you're just kind of adventuring. If you find yourself adventuring alone in that game.
It is
And
scary.
also, what is scary is just like the gaps and strengths between the monsters you fight. My God, but that's a topic for another day.
Yeah.
The Forest is a game in the similar vein as Valheim, but instead of kind of like Norse stuff, you're basically set on an island with cannibals and creepy mythological,
Does sound scary.
not mythological, but like creepy, like who knows, whatever the hell they are, monsters and stuff. Static Speaks My Name. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later, but a very short experience. I think it's free on Steam if anyone wants to check it out. Touches on a lot of like intense kind of psychological stuff, such as like depression, and very directly touches on suicide. So, trigger warning if that's something that upsets you.
Slender.
The 8 pages. Played that so much growing up.
Yeah, that was
Not growing up, but in
Slender.
college.
Yeah, Slender was huge. Slenderman, like, for sure had a moment, like, absolutely. And like,
Yeah.
it just, I like the game, that HBO documentary that came out, like a bunch of people and like teenagers that were like really into the legend and like the mythos of Slenderman and all that stuff. Just became so popular. What happened to that guy? Like, is he
I don't know,
around?
just kind of fell off, but I got really into Slenderman in high school, actually, like my freshman or sophomore year, because I first found like a creepypasta series called Marble Hornets, like a video series.
Oh yeah, that
based
was
on
huge in
footage.
high school. All my friends were
And
into that.
I didn't realize it was fake at first. I was like, oh, this is. I didn't really understand the concept at that point of found footage, like that as a genre. So I was just like terrified of it. And then when I got to college, like that game came out, Slender the 8 pages. I think it was originally just called Slender, actually. And my friends and I literally, our nights were just us all getting drunk and then playing that game sometimes.
Yeah.
And just being like terrified and be like, bro, you play. No, you.
Yeah. Huge.
So many fun memories and scary memories as well. Frambow.
I don't know
Lucas,
this. I don't know
Melon
this
Bait-
one.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet you haven't heard of that. It's another like psychological horror one. It's actually just like a point and click adventure game. Shout outs to Jill if you listen to this episode. Played that with her, one of my good friends. Very, very unique game. Very not scary in the traditional sense, but I think unsettling is a better word for it, with psychological horror elements. Oxenfree.
Did it for the
Again,
pod?
Not really. We did it for the pod. Not a super scary game or horror per se, but it does have the way it distorts the audio at certain times, and kind of the way the screen will distort and kind of mess with your sense of what's actually happening. Adds that horror element to it. Little Nightmares is a really great game. I don't know if you've played this, Lucas. Really great game I've played.
I have
like
not.
A side scroller adventure kind of game, but with horror elements. PT, which I think we can maybe get into a little bit more later, but basically an add-on kind of Silent Hill.
A
Not even
demo.
available anymore. Demo.
It was a downloadable demo for Silent Hills, the Kojima directed
Right,
Silent Hill game.
Yeah. Devotion, which was the game we talked about that like got released nowhere for a while because of China being China.
That's all we got to say.
Amazing things about it. We have Dead Space on here twice. Hot dog. Detention. Lucas, I don't think you've played this, but this is made by the developers that did Devotion, a very, very scary, like side-scrolling adventure horror game. I actually streamed that for a bit
Oh, nice.
when I was like a few years ago when I was trying to do the streaming thing, and very scary. I think it got to the point where I just stopped playing it on stream because I was too stressed.
Oh, wow.
But that's also more of a me problem. Um, and then PT. Oh wait, no,
We already did PT. Bloodborne.
PT. Bloodborne, of course, I wanted to include that as well. Bloodborne, for those that don't know, is a Souls-like game that's in the same vein as Dark Souls, but it's much more like Halloween themed
Yeah.
horror. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool, man. Yeah, that's like kind of a broad overview, kind of going back. I guess we only really went back like 20 years, but I mean, we're missing a million horror games on here that could totally be on here. So if anybody has any, or you listen to the episode, join us in the Discord and give us your favorite horror game. Matt, you want to real quick let the fans know where they could find our Discord?
Lucas, I'm so glad you brought that up. Everyone, as always, if you want to kind of hang out in our Discord, you can either find it on our website, thanks for playing it .live, or you can find on our social medias. You can go to on Twitter and Instagram, TFP Podcasts. That's TFP Podcasts with an S at the end. If you go into our link tree over there, you'll be able to find both the you'll be able to find the links to our Discord as well as any of our other stuff like our YouTube where we're at right now and all that fun stuff. And of course, as always, if you can't find any of that online, maybe you're stuck. I don't know. You can shoot us an email at thanksforplayingpod@gmail.com, and we'll send you a personal invite link.
That's right.
Or maybe we'll just say thanks for playing.
But yeah,
Try it.
that's right. Yeah, and definitely subscribe on YouTube so you can check out our live streams. We're trying to get back into those again. So we'll be doing them roughly once a week, anytime Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday is usually when we record. So we'll be doing them. Of course, we're always putting them in the Discord when we do, so you'll be getting notifications through YouTube and through Discord. All right. Matt, I got a question for you. What makes a scary game?
Ooh. Well, that's why we're having this whole episode, isn't it?
What do you think?
I think for me, what makes a game scary at the end of the day is the feeling of making it seem so realistic it could happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like whatever you're experiencing in the game. And I find that true in movies. And obviously with games, I think games can be scary and not have that trait per se because maybe some of them are so fantastic that it's just it would never happen in your lifetime. Like take, for example, Dead Space, or I really doubt you're going to find yourself in the situation that the main character is in Amnesia or Outlast do. But for me personally, what makes these games scary is the possibility that like this event or like some version of this event or the personal horrors and the personal terror that a character is experiencing, that whether by that event that they're experiencing or some sort of similar event, if that could affect me psychologically in a similar way, that's what scares me.
Feeling like the character.
And creating them being able to create empathy with the character in those scary situations. And then of course, I mean, there's a lot you can go into, like, game design, like tight spaces, things like that, graphics. I think sound's super important in horror games. But I think for me, the most important is making it feel like that you could be that main character.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. I like that. I mean, the best horror movies out there are the ones that make you go, "Oh my God, what would I do in that situation?" Right? Or like, "Oh, would I run?"
I want to go down to the basement. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Or yeah, sometimes horror movies, if they're not so great or they're frustrating to watch, you're like, why are they going to the fucking basement? Stop going to the basement. Like, there's plenty of horror movies that have made me do that. But like, if you watch, let's say, I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre last year during Halloween, and I was thinking like, oh my God, what the hell would I do? Like, it wasn't like a matter of like, why are they doing X, Y, Z? It was more just like, oh God, this is so unsettling. Same thing with like any Saw movie or any of those torture-y, gory movies, you're like, oh God, like I would not, what would I do? How would I feel and all that stuff. So I totally get where you're coming from. And while I was doing a little bit of brainstorming on this topic and taking down some notes here, yeah, I came across kind of four main components that I think really settle in for horror. And a few of them have to do with what we talk about on our podcast regularly, but one is unique, I think, to horror. And I've settled on this in my head that it's essential for horror to work. Excuse me. So, game design totally always applies with every game. Horror games not excluded. We're gonna go into game design and what we really do in game design to make horror games feel scary. Next thing, graphics. I think graphics are really vital with horror games. Whether you're subverting graphics or doing something with the graphics like Doki Doki Literature Club, or you're just getting high fidelity, really scary stuff like an Outlast. Just pure scary, something like that, or like a PT, even playable teaser. Sound, as important as all these things for sure. Sound, there's parts of Dead Space that are just completely silent and just a wall of scary sound. And even the game that we're playing for the pod, for one of our October scary games that you're playing through right now, Matt, sound design is huge, for sure, for sure. And the last thing that I prefaced at the beginning, story. I have come to the conclusion. I was doing research on horror stories and horror genres in the first place. And barring something like H.P. Lovecraft cosmic horror or weird fiction, pretty much every horror story has like a few elements that just make it horror, right? Horror used to be vampires, werewolves, zombies and monsters and things like that. That's like what horror used to be. And horror is like kind of evolved. Psychological horror is a thing, gore, torture, and things like that. But most of the time, horror has something to do with bodily fear, bodily harm, most of the time caused by external forces that are often not rooted in reality. So ghosts, vampires, werewolves, some sort of play on something like something demonic, the devil. Think of like The Exorcist or something like that. Alan Wake, it's ghosts. Silent Hill, it's like zombie ghost monster things. Resident Evil, it's zombies.
Yeah.
Like Fatal Frame, it's ghosts. Like every game that we brought up here, there's monsters in a way. And I think that in horror, barring again like H.P. Lovecraftian cosmic horror, there's usually some sort of component that is like causing bodily harm in the form of a monster, something, even if it's a monster that's like psychologically inside of us. So that's kind of what I've realized is the setting of those few things really do define horror. But what's interesting is it really is hard to pinpoint, right? Like is something scary because it causes anxiety? Is something scary because it gets your heart pumping? Well, not necessarily. So, what is fear, right? What is anxiety? Is something that doesn't have a ghost still horror? Is something like Doki Doki Literature Club horror? Why or why not? Right? And I think that's where we like get just a super interesting thing. Is it horror? Is it scary? Is it creating fear in you? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting that you bring up anxiety or and like because for me when I think of anxiety in games, right, like what makes me anxious in a game or what stresses me out in a game, part of what comes to my mind is things like hard to beat bosses, right? Hard to, things that are hard to get through, or if I'm last, like if I'm last hit against someone, and or I'm talking in melee terms now. I'm sorry, but if I'm one hit away from being killed by a boss, and I know I have to get this last hit in, that's something that might be anxiety inducing. But is that scary? I don't think I'd find that scary, because to me something like that is just a that's just an intense situation, right? To
But
me,
what
that's
if
a
what if that boss is now a werewolf?
oh,
That's
let's
what I'm
go.
saying. Yeah, that's what I'm
Well, then
saying.
I think that's a game relying on cheap tricks, right? Because to me, if you were, I think to be clear, I think anxiety and stress to an extent as well are they can be, I think, scary and more like real world situations and in game, depending on how it affects you as well. I don't want to downplay that and how certain people may react to anxiety. But for me, when I'm experiencing that kind of anxiety, like a last hit situation, they just happen to be a werewolf. To me, that's something that's very akin to like if I'm playing a game of soccer and my team barely has a lead. and trying to like I play defense, I'm trying to hold them off. Like that's that same kind of like anxiety and stress that I would experience in that situation that I'm experiencing in a game instead. So for me, that's not scary. That's just like its own unique thing, right? And I think just because you put a game, you create those situations and then you put a skin on top of it with some vampires and some ugly looking monsters that are pretty scary in the traditional sense, I don't think that's super scary. I think what a game needs to do to be scary is to create a feeling of dread, right? A feeling of dread for your character, a feeling of dread because you're experiencing it with your character. And for you, maybe, this is like a unique thing, right? It's not like mutually, like how what's scary for Lucas might not be scary for me. So that's why we're speaking in like broader terms here. But I think it's the most important is that while it is important a game creates that anxiety and that stress, I think it's important for a game to create a feeling of dread more than anything. And the feeling of not even the feeling of that anxiety when you face the boss, right? That final boss battle or turning a corner and you don't know what's there, but the feeling of dread because you don't know what that boss is going to look like. You don't know what that boss is going to be. The feeling of dread that you don't know what's going to happen when you turn that corner where that weird sound's coming from. That's what makes the game scary with games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I agree with you there. It's just interesting that like, we talk about something like Alan Wake being a horror game, but I didn't really feel like it was a horror game because I never really felt powerless when I was playing it. I didn't really feel a sense of dread. I felt like, okay, like axe murder, ghost coming at me. Like the setting is a horror setting, but the game is not a horror game.
Right.
And I think like that's where video games have this very unique sort of thing going on where if Alan Wake was a movie, it would just be considered a horror movie or a scary movie, right? There's action horror games or action horror movies and things like that, or books that are kind of actiony and also scary books. But with video games, it's like they're very, very separated. Like your game design has to really, really fit into a very specific horror box for game design, and then it has to have that setting as well. So jumping straight into game design, right? Like a few things that I wrote here in terms of game design that really is, relevant to the horror genre is like limited movement, for instance. A lot of the early Resident Evil games did this, especially Resident Evil 1, very claustrophobic hallways, making you feel very powerless, the inability to really like move very much around opponents. So you like are kind of scared. It's definitely not like Alan Wake level. Alan Wake, you could actually move quite a bit. So it's like definitely not as scary or powerless, but yeah, that's one. Tight level design, maze-like structures and things like that. So where the path isn't exactly clear. So you're kind of like, it's a combination of exploring and being scared around every corner that I think great horror games do very well as well. Big one, resource limitation. So games, again, Resident Evil as another prime example. There was actually like not enough resources in Resident Evil 1 to do a lot of things in that game. So you actually needed an item in Resident Evil to even save your game. And
really, I didn't know that.
yeah, you needed ribbons at a typewriter, and you would save your game at a typewriter. So if you even saving was scary because you were like, oh god, do I save now or do I save later? So even the feeling of saving your game was somewhat anxiety inducing. So that's a game design choice. That's not has nothing to do with the setting, has nothing to do with the zombies or ghosts or vampires or anything like that in a traditional horror sense. Purely a game design choice that was made, which I think is really awesome. And then you like depending on if you were low on health or low on ammo, the game would spawn those items for you in certain rooms. So if you had a lot of ammo, the game would not spawn any more ammo for you. It'd actually wait for you to get low on ammo to give you that. So it's really cool because it kind of keeps you on edge where you're like, oh, you can't stock up any resources in this game. There's a resource limitation going on there. Pretty cool. And then last one I have here is lighting controls. So can be put into the graphic category, but I'm speaking more on like limiting lighting sources or the ability for the player to see. So sometimes in video games you have candles that only last a certain amount of time, or your flashlight only has a certain amount of battery life in it. Yeah, so those kinds of things create a lot of anxiety because every human has sort of a natural fear of the dark. You know, so light as a precious resource is so natural in game design.
I mean, and I know we're like saying it's not that scary of a game, but just to kind of point to that and just how like obvious of a choice it is for game designers to focus on, literally one of the main mechanics of Alan Wake is how well can you preserve your light. And one of the main mechanics in the game is just seeking out light, finding light's literally your safe haven where you regenerate health. Things like that are, and those are like checkpoints for you as well. So I think that just
Yeah.
kind of pays tribute to just how important light is in
Yeah.
these games designs and how much of a, well, obviously not a scary thing, but how much of a saving grace and something it makes you like vie for it, right? It makes you want it.
Totally. Was there a lighting thing in Slender? There was, right? You had a flashlight, right?
I want to say you had a flashlight. I don't think it did anything other than just giving you light, though.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think it
I
just
think
did
and
get
that's right.
genuinely very hard to see once you didn't have it. I could be wrong on that. It's been a while since I played that game.
Okay. Yeah, so game design is just there are totally genre conventions to how we design scary games. I think limited movement is one that's pretty universal. And again, like I mentioned, is I think that their survival horror genre has really evolved over time, to the point where it's really approached like third person action. And if you play something like, you know, the original Resident Evil and then you play Resident Evil 4 or Dead Space, you're gonna see that like the movement options increase a little bit. Like you could actually strafe in Dead Space. You couldn't even strafe. You couldn't even strafe in Resident Evil 4. It's kind of crazy. In Dead Space, you actually can. So you can kind of move a little bit, but you still can't see behind you. The camera is still very close to the character, third
Yeah.
person, and it is creating a constant fear of like, oh God, what's behind me? And that is scary. That is for sure scary. Alan Wake kind of does the same thing to a certain degree, but not to the level of like you don't ever feel so powerless in that game. I guess always going back to it of like drawing that line. Fatal Frame, you can't move for shit. Like at all. Uh, Amnesia, I'm trying to go down the line here. Amnesia, you just don't even have any weapons, so you're just running the whole time. The whole time, so that's scary for that whole reason. But yeah, that's kind of my little critique there on game design.
Yeah, I agree with all those are. I mean, it's like a recipe, right? You know, it's like you need sugar, spice, and everything nice.
Yeah, yeah,
And game design is just the sugar in this context.
right.
Next is graphics. I think that's an interesting one. We've already kind of touched on it a bit, right? Where you were mentioning earlier how like the games from the early 2000s and maybe even earlier, right? How those were horror games before. They're not really. I mean, they're still horror games by design and by genre conventions, but you're not going to be scared the same way you are when you played Silent Hill when it originally came out, as than if you were to play it now. Whereas you pointed out, if you were to play Amnesia now and then playing it now when it came out again, right?
Yep.
Um, so it's interesting because I think going forward, it's very important that to make a game that, what's the word we always look for, holds up, right? Holds up. And I think that's a very interesting challenge when it comes to horror games for the reasons we just mentioned. That said, though, I think in some cases, like, say for example, a game like Doki Doki, right? I think Doki Doki is a video game that for the horror genre is going to be kind of timeless because, I mean, for starters, it's a visual novel, like a true visual novel, right? Not like a kind of play on it, like say Phoenix Wright would be like, it's a true visual novel. And the style of visual novels hasn't changed in ever, really.
Yeah, ever.
Ever. It's just kind of, it has its convention and that's what it does. But what Doki Doki does so well that I love is using these visual bugs, and just straight up art to create horror, right? And I think visual bugs would often be a downfall to games, right? Particularly horror games, because the second something glitches out and it breaks the illusion in a horror game, the illusion is broken and you're taken out of the experience. It's like when a light goes off in a movie theater, right? It just takes you
Yeah.
out of the experience and you're no longer absorbed in it. But with Doki Doki, when you're having these bugs, and particularly when you're playing on your computer, because it kind of plays with you as well, specifically for the computer. It came out for Switch, so not really sure how some of those
I
work.
know.
But
I
anyways,
wonder.
I might have to do a replay just to experience that. But specifically, the way Doki Doki utilizes it does kind of create like you were mentioning earlier, some of that sense of anxiety that can be tied to that sense of dread. And I mean, I'll just say it as well for me personally. I think Doki Doki is one of the scariest games out there, for a multitude of reasons, just from a simple horror
I
aspect, for
agree.
being scary, for shock value, for, I mean, I'm not going to spoil it here, but
It's a
there's a,
psychological horror though.
yeah,
You know,
and
it's in that setting
yeah,
more so.
and I just remember there was a certain point where I never felt more dread in a game where I had to go to a certain place, and you know exactly what you're gonna find, and then you find it, and
Ugh.
then when you find, I literally, I never forget, I when I saw that, and if you play Doki Doki, you know what I'm talking about. It happens in your first playthrough. When I saw it, I literally freaked out. I yelled because I was just so upset. And
Yeah.
then I was playing on my laptop at the time, and I just shut my laptop.
God,
Yeah. I was like, oh fuck,
that game is so scary.
so good. And
Go
then
check out our Doki Doki episode for those of
Doki
you
Doki,
that have
better
not.
episodes for
Yeah.
sure. And then not really necessarily graphics per se, but I think art style is so important too. Like the one a great example I think of really scary art in a game actually is the final boss in Undertale, the Flowey final boss. Um, it has like this very, and Lucas, I think it's surrealistic. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it's like this very
It's more
surrealist.
mixed media, I'd say, like where it's out of place for the
Okay,
graphics.
so yeah,
Yeah.
mixed media and like just very out of place design for what you like. You've been playing a pixel art game the whole time, like 16-bit, whatever. Then you get to the final boss, and it's this terrifying like
Yeah.
amalgamation of just like, I don't even know what to call it. And then it has like actual, um, I think it's actually Toby Fox like in there, and his face
Yeah.
is all like distorted. He's like just these terrifying faces, and it kind of just really breaks the reality of the game, right? And I'm just like, this is, for me, that was scary personally.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, graphics are an interesting debate when it comes to scary games. I mean, right now I have Silent Hill 1 screenshots pulled up on my computer. I'll probably throw them in the Discord after this episode is released, but it is really funny that like, I'm looking at this particular screenshot and this does not look scary whatsoever. It just looks silly, right? Because
Silent
it's
Hill.
like, yeah, it's just games just don't look that way anymore, you know? And seeing like a very boxy protagonist point a gun at a gargoyle on a bridge, it just looks funny. So that was peak. That was like peak horror video game back in the day, and now it can't be taken as seriously as a horror game. So it's kind of tied graphically to what it was. Probably in need of a reboot. I think that the first Resident Evil the first Resident Evil got rebooted. I think kind of for a similar reason, where just kind of needed to be brought forth gameplay wise and graphic wise into 2020. So yeah, that's
They
graphics.
have announced a Silent Hill reboot actually for the PS5.
Oh, cool. Okay, we'll have
Yeah,
to
I'm
jump in on
not
that.
sure what
See,
the release date on that is, but oh,
that's gonna be spooky.
did this already come out? No. We gotta do a little more research on this one. But yeah, it looks like
What
there's a Silent Hill coming for the PS5.
what happened to
Which is
Silent
exciting.
Hills though?
Hills.
That must so I think Silent Hills is like it's the canceled Kojima del Toro project, right? Or is what the one coming
I
out for
don't
the
know if it
PS5
was.
now?
I know he collaborated on it. I don't know if it was meant to be a full game. I mean, the game is literally PT. Literally stands for playable teaser. But was that supposed to be Silent Hills? That game, is that correct?
Well, it says Silent Hills at the end of the playable teaser.
Must just be a canceled project then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind
Man,
of a
what
bummer because I know that teaser like shook the world, right?
I wonder what happened to
I know that
Kojima.
was a very scary like 20-minute experience.
Yeah, yeah. All right, moving on to
Did you
sound.
say? Did you say you wonder what happened to Kojima?
Well, like it's just
He
you
went on
know
to make a walking simulator. That's what happened.
he got too avant-garde. I mean, maybe he became hard to work with or something because it's like the Silent Hill thing he was working on gets canceled, and then the series that he had basically the series he had created and directed for so long, just he loses that completely and then makes Death Stranding, and like yeah, I know it's wild. And he loves Norman Reedus apparently
You know
because
what the
Norman
problem?
Reedus was in
I'll tell you
Playable
what
Teaser.
happened to you know how we know Hideo Kojima is all he needs to rethink some things. I remember when I was doing research for 12 minutes, Hideo Kojima said he liked that game,
Okay, someone's got to talk to Kojima.
which is problematic
That is
in its
problematic.
own right.
Man, he loves like actors in games.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh man.
I mean,
we gotta
that one was
honestly.
pretty bad. 12 minutes was pretty bad, guys.
Yeah, it was. It was. There's no excuse for liking that game. I'm sorry. I gotta move on. We gotta move on to sound. All right. So sound is and always has been one of the best things to emphasize in design. Um, it's I mean, sound is scary. I mean, always like I think I mentioned it how like in Dead Space, there's just parts where the screen goes completely black. And I remember listening to an interview with some of the developers, and they said, "Yeah, it turns out you can just have a room with nothing in it, and you can kill the lights and have like monster sounds, and like all of a sudden it's like one of the scariest rooms in the game." You know, like you didn't create any assets, you didn't design anything, there's no concept art, you just kind of have it, you just let an audio engineer kind of do their creative thing with monster sounds, and all of a sudden it's scary. Even like Playable Teaser, I watched a playthrough of Playable Teaser in preparation for this episode, and like, oh my God, like 80% of what makes that whole thing scary is the sound. It's like you hear a crying baby, you hear like someone die, you hear someone get murdered and slashed in a bathroom. I mean, you just hear all these like guttural, scary bodily harm things
Well,
going
what's
on, and
crazy
it's
about sound,
scary.
right, is because it's not visual and it's just audio, right? What sound does is it implies something. It implies
Yeah,
what's going on in the next room. It implies that if you turn around this corner, it's going to be terrifying and you're going to be fucked.
yeah,
And it's that
exactly.
implication. I think again that kind of again I think that implication, that possibility, is what builds that sense of dread, right? Because oftentimes, and some deep life stuff, right? We'll often think, or we'll often find that thinking about something is scarier than actually experiencing it, right? And
Yeah,
I think what sound does is it creates the thoughts of what something could be before you actually see it, and just
right.
those thoughts can spiral out of control and create these terrifying. It lets your imagination run
Yeah.
wild. Is the
And
thing, right?
yeah, totally. And also like on an evolutionary level, like humans are more alerted to sound, right? Like we're more tuned into like rustling in the bushes, right? I mean, we're tuned like we're tuned into visuals as well, but like let's say you're early human man in a cave, right? And like outside the cave, it's nighttime and you hear rustling in the bushes. You're evolutionarily programmed to be afraid right now, right? Because like there's a creature in the bush, right? So even something rustling, growling, like something like that is meant to set you off on a biological level,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just like how visually like blood, like gore, sharp fangs and teeth and like eyes that glow in the dark, like predatory things are meant to scare you visually. You know, like stuff that's not supposed to be there as far as sound, that's always going to set you off, I think.
100%, without a
Yeah.
doubt. Yeah. Story. Oof. What gets you
Yeah.
going
So,
with us? That's such an interesting one, right?
well, what makes a story scary?
I, g- I think I kind of tie it back to my original thing that I was saying is like, for me, what makes the game scary is like that it could actually happen to you, right? Again, like Doki Doki, as I mentioned, is for me one of the scariest games out there, and it is very much. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things that would never happen in your real life, but it's very much a commentary on a variety of mental health issues, and just issues in general, such as suffering from abuse and having health issues because of that, like weight issues, OCD, pain OCD, which is a very real thing, depression, suicidal thoughts, tendencies, and actual suicide in that game. It's all very um, intense. And when you see characters experiencing something like that in a game, and especially in a game too, where you think in a game like let's pretend you're playing something like a Resident Evil, right? Like that's not you're not meant to like think empathize with the character in the sense, right? But in a game like Doki Doki, you're empathizing with these characters that have these very real problems, that could also happen in your life. So when you create a story that focuses around characters that are also experiencing things that you could experience yourself,
Yeah.
and their lives are just going to shit, and there's nothing you can do to save them, or seemingly nothing you can do to help them or save them, and you just have to watch this horror show play out. That's scary to me, because then it kind of translates, fuck, what if happened in my life, right? And then another great game that is a really good example of this is a game called, I mentioned it earlier a little bit, the static
Speaks my
the
name.
static speaks my name, which spoilers for the next minute. If you plan on Lucas Duke here, actually, I know you haven't played this yet either.
Ah, man. Can you keep it spoiler free at all? I feel like I. Ah, no, go for it.
All right,
Go
it's
for
like a 15-minute. Anyway, it's I think it's in the title, not in the title, but in the description. Anyways, it's literally just a 15-minute experience, and it's just you in like a very like basic generated world, walking around this guy's house that's clearly depressed, and just kind of seeing like his very menial task and what could be perceived as a meaningless life, and the whole game literally just culminates with you killing yourself, committing suicide. There's no
it.
way out of it. It's just you forcibly experiencing someone's last day, and it's not even. It's interesting, right? Because it's not dramatic. It's just clearly like this person has decided they're going to end their life, and it's just walking you through the last experiences and kind of showing you little hints of what led them to this point.
Wow.
And that was a very interesting game to experience, and yeah, so that's the stuff
Wow.
that's scariest to me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think things like Dead Space, like if I played Dead Space, I'd be yelling the whole time and like punching someone with their next to me out of fear, right? Like I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, I scare easy, like that escape room thing I was talking about. But those are scares that don't stick with me. Those are scares in the moment. Like the horror created from these kind of games are something that I'm thinking about, right? And that stays
Totally.
with me.
Totally. I mean, I can like what scares me the most, I think, when it comes to stories are sort of like the things that are manifestations, like when the horror story is sort of a metaphor for something else. Bodily harm, like, man, I feel like the horror movies that I grew up with were like totally slasher movies, and then like the Saw era of horror movies. I don't know if you recall this, Matt, but there was a time where basically every scary movie that came out was a torture movie. It was like Saw 1, Saw 2, Saw 3,
You're just
House of
going for like the
Wax.
gore shock factor, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was just teenagers go to a thing, they start disappearing one by one, and they start getting tortured by like some maniac somewhere. And like that was every single horror movie for like a good 8 to 10 years, maybe. And then before that, it was just slasher, Scream, Scream 2, Freddy, Friday the 13th, like Nightmare on Elm Street. It was just like monster killing teenagers, right? And now we're kind of entering this like art house horror, like Ari Aster era, where we're getting things like Midsommar or Babadook, It Follows, what's the other, Hereditary. You know, we're getting all these horror movies that are actually trying to be a little bit more artistic for one with the genre, but also like using horror as a driving force to talk about human trauma, right? So, spoiler alert, I guess for Midsommar. Matt, you saw Midsommar.
I've seen
You know,
Midsommar.
it's family trauma that is at the center of what is wrong. I mean, it
Yes.
opens up with like a murder suicide, and it's like horrible. You know, it's like
Yeah.
absolutely devastating, and then the whole movie just gets twisted from there and all crazy. And it's about relationships and all this other stuff. It's not necessarily about the horror component, although it is a horror movie because young kids just start disappearing and getting murdered one by one by one. So to me, I think that's what I'm most into at the moment is like horror stories that are really supposed to be analogies or metaphors for like a deeper seated problem that we're facing. The slasher thing, the torture thing just really got played out for me over time, especially growing up with those movies. It just kind of lost its thing. And the other thing too that scares me a lot is that like H.P. Lovecraft like cosmic horror, like the type of I'm not sure if you're so familiar with it, Matt. Are you like
And
the
under the
Cthulhu?
general like Cthulhu stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like the basic consensus of like a lot of H.P. Lovecraft horror was that the reader, the audience was meant to feel very insignificant. Where like a lot of horror stories at that time, this is like early 1920s, kind of early 20th century stuff. A lot of horror stories, again, still vampires, zombies, werewolves, that kind of thing. H.P. Lovecraft writes about an ancient forgotten city in Antarctica where like an expedition of people found like a ancient race of beings that long precede humans. And the whole thing is that like we don't belong to Earth any more than like they are the true rulers, right? And
Right.
like there's
Yeah.
all these ancient cosmic gods that ruled the Earth, and like we're nothing basically. And like all of his protagonists go mad at like the realization that they are insignificant to the universe.
Just
That's
everyone
scary.
realizing we don't belong here.
Exactly. That stuff's
Yeah.
scary to me too. Totally,
And to
totally
kind of
scary.
mention on that, I wanted to bring it up earlier when we were talking about sound a little bit, but I think another good example of that is kind of Outer Wilds. Well, very clearly not intended to be a horror game. For me, some of the most scary experiences in gaming in recent memory, for me at least, was when I'm in my ship and something goes wrong and I have to go outside to, for whatever reason, try and fix something in the depths of space, and something else goes wrong and I get separated from my ship and I can't get back because of gravity pulling me somewhere else. And then I just end up drifting in space literally until I die or the time
That
limit
is
gets
scary.
in that game. And I'll never forget to in that game the final bit where spoilers in the next 15 seconds for Outer Wilds, where you're like entering literally like you're at like the center of the universe and you're entering the eye of the universe, and it's just like this bleakness and it's just terrifying. And something
Yeah.
about just the idea of sitting in space is very terrifying to me. And even right
Emptiness.
now, when you like started bringing up cosmic horror again, I was literally just thinking to myself internally, like, oh, fuck, there's like a whole universe out there. Like, it was kind
That's
of making me,
scary.
it was kind of making me upset and anxious. Like,
Yeah, it's
um,
anxiety inducing for sure to like
extremely, yeah.
to come to the realization that like we're just so small.
Like the thought that aliens might not get to listen to this podcast just
Oh,
uh,
that's so scary.
I don't know what to do. Like, I gotta send out some radio waves to them. Like,
Well, I'm gonna have
download
nightmares
Apple
tonight.
Podcasts. I know.
Yeah.
I think I might honestly. I'm just thinking about outer space now, and it's freaking me out. That's funny. But yeah, I think those are kind of like the main things in games, right? That we look at.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have
I
anything
even
else?
and I like it. I don't know if you mentioned. I might have missed. I apologize. You brought up Killer 7 too, which is
Oh yeah, I wrote that on the list
I
here.
like that a lot too, because the whole thing with Killer 7 is, and that came out, correct me if I'm wrong, with the early post 9/11,
2002, 2003, I think.
post
Yeah.
9/11 world where, the, I mean, I won't speak for the whole world, but at least the U.S. and America was just fueled on the terror of terrorism. Right?
Yeah.
And then in a Killer 7, you're literally fighting like an invisible enemy, basically. So that I think that's a very clear play on like the horrors of how scared we can get of an invisible enemy, and like how it can lead us to do shitty things in real life too, right?
Yeah.
But just assuming that there's an enemy there, right? Or just assuming someone must be an enemy, things like that. So I think games that can kind of comment on that too are kind of scary in their own way, because they comment on the shittiness of humans a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Man, Killer 7, what a great game. Very good.
I think about that game quite often.
Yeah, dude. I knew it.
I think the
mean,
games I think about that we've done on the podcast the most are probably, actually surprisingly not Doki Doki. I try not to think about that game because it upsets me.
yeah.
It's a great game though. I think about Killer 7 a lot. I think about Outer Wilds a lot. And what else?
I think about Obra Dinn quite a bit.
Obra Dinn. I think
yeah.
about Obra Dinn because Obra Dinn was just so unique, and I'm upset because it doesn't actually. If I give it like another year, it'll have replay value because I don't remember everything that well. But like for a while, it won't have that much replay value. We've just done so many good games.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about today. Maybe we'll do a year-end wrap-up come New Year's time. And
Oh yeah, that'll be
that's
fun.
it of it.
Be
Yeah.
fun. Well, everybody, I think that's all we got for the horror game episode.
This was a
for
long
Anything's
one. for
Possible.
Anything's
Yeah, this
Possible.
was.
I think we're
this-
pushing an hour.
Yeah, this was good.
was fun.
I was excited to dive into this one, and hopefully it's kind of kickstart everybody's spooky season. Hopefully people are out there
Yeah.
watching some horror movies, playing some horror video games. It is good stuff.
Yeah. Also, quick shout out to, I just want to mention it while we're here on the topic. One of my favorite genres actually is for movies is horror satire.
What? Can you give me an
I-
example?
Cabin in the Woods.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Cabin in the Woods, Haunted House. I think it's called Haunted House, which it's like making fun of paranormal or activity. There's two. of them.
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
never forget me and mine and Lucas's mutual friend Neil, who I've known since high school. We went and saw it in high school. Like we saw it opening night, Haunted House 2. We're like, oh, bro, it's gonna be sick. It's gonna be a packed theater. It's gonna be such a fun experience. And literally, it was just me and him in the theater.
That's pretty great. Yeah.
Um,
There's there's so many good ones out there. I love Cabin in the Woods. I got to rewatch that one. That one's a fun one.
Yeah, that's a super fun one. And I think
Yeah.
horror satire is hit or miss for people, but I love things that make light on things that are supposed to be serious.
Yeah. Cabin in
I
the
have
Woods
I
is
have a good time with
genuinely
it.
great. It's like genuinely
It's
a
a really
great
good
movie.
movie.
Yeah,
Really
like
good
it's
on play on
awesome
horror trope. But
for
all
sure.
right, everyone. Lucas, let's see anything else. I think that's all we have today. Everyone, as always, remember, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, you can find us Twitter, Instagram, TFP Podcast. Hit up the link tree. Go check out our, come join our Discord. It's a fun, good time in there. Check out our website. We really don't push that enough. We should do more with that. Thanks for playing live. And shoot us an email if you want. Thanks for playing pod, gmail.com. Let us know what your scariest game is. And, hey, don't forget, if you're listening on Apple Podcast, leave a review, only if you're going to leave 5 stars. I'll take
Please.
4 stars, preferably 5. And if you want to leave a 1-star review, maybe before you do that, shoot us an email. Let's talk out what you don't like about the podcast and get some constructive feedback. But leave a review and tell us, who do you think would die first in a horror movie? Me or Lucas?
Ooh, that's great. Oh, I can't wait for that answer to
Or
come
same
back.
time. I think that could be a fun one too. But yeah, let us know
I
what you think. And yeah, that's all I got. Lucas?
honestly, it I think it's you. I'm just like being completely honest. It's for sure not me.
I think it's me too. Just 'cause
Okay.
I think if I was put in a horror movie situation, I'd be the guy that doesn't take things seriously. Like, guys, come on, you
Yeah.
really think there's a guy after us?
Yeah.
And then I open a door and get just wrecked.
Yeah.
You
That
gotta be
is
are
so
you guys
you.
really, really doing this right now? Come on,
Yeah.
we're in Cabo, guys.
Yeah,
Let's party.
yeah, that's totally you. Man, I can't wait to go to Cabo now. Yeah, Dragoon in the chat says death Matt, so I think he's in tune. All right, cool, man. This is a good one.
All right, everyone. Well, this has been Anything's Possible. And remember, anything's possible.